You planted black-eyed Susans because everyone told you they were one of the easiest flowers you'll ever grow. They survive drought, they love the heat, they come back every year. They're practically impossible to kill. So why did yours disappear? Maybe they bloomed beautifully that first summer, only to vanish by the following spring. Maybe they returned, but with fewer flowers. Or perhaps they've become tall, floppy, and covered in leaves, instead of those cheerful golden blooms you were expecting. Here's the truth that almost nobody at the garden center tells you. Black-eyed Susans don't usually die because they're difficult plants. They die because gardeners unknowingly treat them like every other flower in the garden. The watering advice is often wrong. The fertilizer advice is even worse. And perhaps the biggest mistake of all is buying the wrong black-eyed Susan before you ever put a shovel in the ground. Today, I'm going to show you 11 secrets that completely change the way you grow these iconic prairie flowers. These aren't complicated tricks or expensive products. They're based on how black-eyed Susans have survived for centuries, growing across open meadows, roadsides, and wild prairies, with nobody watering them, fertilizing them, or fussing over them. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some gardeners enjoy the same thriving patch for decades, while others keep replacing dead plants every couple of years. And make sure you stay with me, because secret number 6 is the one that keeps your black-eyed Susans blooming for weeks longer than most people think possible. Yet it's one of the most overlooked habits in home gardens. But before we head out into today's garden, I have a special announcement. The gardening guide you've been writing to me about for months is finally here. The Plant Once Garden is officially out. You have been incredibly patient with me while I took the time to get this right. It is approximately 150 pages of everything this channel teaches, gathered into one complete reference, designed with a hand-drawn heritage cover and warm cream pages that feel like a guide your grandmother would have owned. Inside, you'll find the 90 perennial plants that come back every year with almost no labor, 6 complete garden plans, the no-labor planting calendar, and the hydrogen peroxide method explained completely. I've also included the specific perennials that bring hummingbirds singing and dancing right outside your window, the chapter on what your garden becomes over 20 years, and the mistakes that kill perennials. This is a reference you can lean on for the rest of your gardening life. You can scan the QR code on your screen right now, or click the link in the pinned comment or description below to get your copy. Thank you again for your patience. Now, let's get back to today's topic. Number 1. Stop buying the wrong black-eyed Susan. This is the mistake that happens before you've even started gardening. Most people assume every black-eyed Susan is exactly the same plant. They look nearly identical at the nursery. They have bright golden petals, dark chocolate centers, and almost identical labels. But they don't all live the same way. There are 2 main types you'll run into, and choosing the wrong one can completely change your expectations. If you want a plant that reliably comes back year after year, slowly grows into a larger clump, and becomes a permanent feature in your garden, you're looking for Rudbeckia fulgida, especially varieties like Goldsturm. This is the perennial powerhouse. Instead of depending entirely on seeds, it quietly spreads underground through rhizomes. Every season, those underground stems expand a little farther, producing new shoots that make the plant fuller, stronger, and more impressive with age. That's why you'll often see mature clumps covered with hundreds of flowers after several years. The plant isn't getting lucky, it's getting established. Now compare that to Rudbeckia hirta. This is the black-eyed Susan many people unknowingly buy. It usually behaves as an annual or a short-lived biennial. That means the original plant often lives for only 1 or 2 seasons before dying. And that's where the confusion begins. People assume the flower failed. In reality, it survived in a completely different way. Instead of returning from the same root system, it drops thousands of seeds that germinate around the original plant. If conditions are right, you'll still have black-eyed Susans every year. They're simply new plants replacing the old ones. It's nature's way of keeping the patch alive. Neither species is bad. You simply need to know which one matches your expectations. If you want dependable, long-lived perennial clumps that become easier every year, choose Rudbeckia fulgida. If you enjoy a more natural meadow appearance with flowers constantly reseeding themselves throughout the garden, Rudbeckia hirta can be an excellent choice. The important thing is knowing the difference before you buy, because no amount of watering, feeding, or pruning can turn a short-lived plant into a decades-long perennial. Once you've picked the right variety, the next secret becomes incredibly important, because even the toughest black-eyed Susan won't perform well if you plant it in the wrong location. Number 2. Give them the sun they were designed. For black-eyed Susans aren't woodland flowers, they're prairie flowers. Think about where you've probably seen them growing naturally. Open fields, roadsides, meadows, abandoned pastures, places where the summer sun beats down from morning until evening. That's exactly the environment they evolved to handle. Yet one of the biggest mistakes gardeners make is squeezing them into partially shaded flower beds, simply because there's an empty space available. The plant will survive. But surviving isn't the same as thriving. Here's the rule. Give your black-eyed Susans at least 6 hours of direct sunlight every single day. More is even better. The extra sunlight doesn't just produce more flowers. It changes the entire structure of the plant. In full sun, stems stay shorter, stronger, thicker. The flowers sit upright instead of collapsing across neighboring plants. The leaves dry quickly after morning dew, helping reduce many common fungal problems before they ever begin. Now compare that with a plant growing in too much shade. Instead of becoming compact, it stretches toward every bit of available light. The stems become longer. The spaces between leaves become wider. Eventually, the plant grows top-heavy. One heavy rainstorm, one windy afternoon, and suddenly those beautiful golden flowers are lying across your pathway instead of standing proudly in your garden. Shade also creates another hidden problem. Moisture lingers longer on the foliage. That may not seem like a big deal, but damp leaves combined with poor airflow create ideal conditions for diseases like powdery mildew and leaf spot. Ironically, many gardeners respond by watering even more, making the problem even worse. If you only remember one thing from this secret, remember this. Don't choose the location that's convenient for you. Choose the location the plant would have chosen for itself. Find the brightest, sunniest part of your garden. That's where black-eyed Susans truly show you what they're capable of. And once you've given them enough sunlight, there's another habit that many well-meaning gardeners accidentally use to weaken them. It's called kindness. Number 3. Stop feeding them like prize roses. Sometimes the fastest way to make a black-eyed Susan weaker is to make the soil richer. That sounds backwards. After all, we've been taught that flowers love fertilizer. So when gardeners plant a new perennial, many immediately reach for high nitrogen fertilizers, hoping for explosive growth. And they certainly get growth, just not the kind they wanted. Nitrogen encourages lush green leaves, big stems, rapid growth. The problem is that all of this leafy growth comes at a cost. The plant starts investing more energy into foliage than flowers. Instead of dozens of sturdy blooms, you end up with tall, soft stems carrying heavy foliage that bends under its own weight. The flowers become fewer, the stems flop over, and the plant begins looking tired long before the season is over. That's not how black-eyed Susans evolved. In the wild, they grow in ordinary soils that many gardeners would consider unimpressive. They don't need constant feeding. In fact, average soil often produces stronger plants. When nutrients aren't unlimited, black-eyed Susans naturally build thicker stems that support themselves better while producing the bright flowers they're famous for. So what should you do? When planting, work in a light layer of compost if your soil is particularly poor. Then stop. Let the plant settle in. Once established, resist the temptation to fertilize every spring simply because you're fertilizing everything else. These flowers reward restraint far more than constant attention. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is absolutely nothing. And speaking of doing less, the next secret may completely change the way you've been watering your black-eyed Susans for years. Number 4. Water the soil, not the plant. Here's something that surprises a lot of gardeners. Black-eyed Susans don't mind getting wet. They mind staying wet. There's a huge difference. Watch what happens after a summer rainstorm. The flowers dry fairly quickly once the sun comes out. But if the weather stays humid or the plants are crowded together, moisture clings to those rough, hairy leaves much longer than you'd expect. That's exactly what fungal diseases are waiting for. Powdery mildew, leaf spot, blight. These problems don't usually appear overnight. They build slowly after weeks of damp foliage, and by the time you notice white patches or dark spots spreading across the leaves, the disease has already taken hold. The frustrating part is that many gardeners accidentally create these conditions themselves. They stand with a hose in the evening, spraying the entire plant from top to bottom because that's how they've always watered flowers. It feels thorough. It feels helpful. Unfortunately, it's also one of the easiest ways to encourage fungal problems. Instead, imagine where the plant actually drinks. Not from the leaves, not from the flowers, from the roots. That's where every drop of water should go. Place the hose at the base of the plant and let the water slowly soak into the soil. Better yet, use a drip irrigation system or a soaker hose if you have one. These methods deliver moisture exactly where it's needed while keeping the foliage almost completely dry. Timing matters just as much. Always water early in the morning whenever possible. If a few leaves do get wet, they'll have the entire day to dry in the sunshine. Avoid watering late in the evening unless absolutely necessary. Cool nights combined with wet leaves create the perfect environment for disease to spread. Think about it this way. You're not watering a flower. You're watering a root system hidden beneath the soil. Once you make that small mental shift, you'll naturally begin watering in a way that keeps your plants healthier for years. But even watering correctly won't help if you're watering far too often. And that's where the next mistake quietly destroys more black-eyed Susans than almost anything else. Number 5. Water deeply, then leave them alone. Most gardeners believe healthy plants need frequent watering. Black-eyed Susans completely disagree. One of the reasons these flowers became famous across North America is because they learned to survive long periods without rain. Their secret isn't magic, it's their roots. When you water lightly every day, the plant has no reason to send roots deep into the ground. Why would it? Water is always waiting near the surface. The roots stay shallow. Then the first heat wave arrives. The top inch of soil dries out in a single afternoon, and suddenly the plant begins wilting because its roots never learned to search deeper. Now compare that with a plant watered properly. Instead of little sips every day, it receives one deep soaking. The moisture travels several inches into the soil. The roots follow it downward. Week after week, those roots grow stronger, deeper, and more resilient. Eventually, the plant becomes remarkably drought-tolerant because it's drawing moisture from parts of the soil that stay cool and damp long after the surface has dried. That's exactly what you want. Once your black-eyed Susans are established, they rarely need constant watering. During normal weather, rainfall is often enough. Only during extended hot, dry periods should you step in. When you do water, soak the soil thoroughly. Then walk away. Let the top 1 to 2 inches of soil dry before watering again. Don't panic if the surface looks dry. Always check beneath it. Stick your finger into the soil. If you still feel moisture underneath, the plant doesn't need another drink. Overwatering causes a different problem that's much harder to fix. Roots need oxygen just as much as they need water. When the soil stays constantly soaked, those tiny air pockets disappear. The roots begin suffocating. Then they rot. Many gardeners mistake those symptoms for drought because the leaves start drooping, so they water even more. Instead of solving the problem, they accelerate it. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is put the hose away. Black-eyed Susans were never meant to live in permanently wet soil. They were built to handle dry spells. Trust them. They've been doing it for centuries. Now, once you've mastered watering, there's one simple habit that can keep your plants flowering far longer than most gardeners ever experience. Number 6. Remove the old flowers before they make seeds. Here's something your black-eyed Susan wants to do all summer long. Make seeds. That's its entire mission. The moment a flower finishes blooming, the plant immediately starts directing energy toward producing seeds for the next generation. From the plant's perspective, the job is done. But from a gardener's perspective, the show has only just begun. If you leave every faded flower in place throughout the summer, the plant slowly shifts its attention away from producing fresh blooms. Instead, it's investing precious energy into ripening hundreds of seeds. That's why flowering often begins slowing down much earlier than people expect. Fortunately, there's an incredibly simple solution: deadheading. As soon as a flower starts fading, follow the stem downward until you reach the next healthy leaf node or side shoot. Make a clean cut just above it. That's it. You haven't harmed the plant. You've simply interrupted its seed production. Instead of thinking its work is finished, the plant receives a signal to keep producing more flowers. Repeat this regularly through early and mid-summer, and you'll often enjoy wave after wave of fresh blooms extending well into autumn. It only takes a few minutes every week. Many experienced gardeners even carry a pair of pruners while walking through the garden, removing faded blooms as they notice them. Little by little, the plant stays neat, colorful, and constantly producing new flowers. But here's where timing becomes important. Don't deadhead forever. Later in the season, it's actually better to stop. And the reason has nothing to do with the flowers themselves. It has everything to do with the wildlife that depends on them. We'll come back to that shortly. By the way, if you're looking to completely transform your yard into a low-maintenance paradise, don't forget that my full reference guide, The Plant Once Garden, is now officially available. It's 150 pages, covering all the perennial foundations and permanent setups we talk about on this channel. You can scan the QR code right here on the screen, or find the link in the pinned comment below to grab your copy. Now, let's get right back into today's topic. Number 7. Stop deadheading before autumn arrives. For the first half of the growing season, deadheading is one of the best things you can do for your black-eyed Susans. But eventually, you need to stop. This is where many gardeners accidentally rob both their garden and local wildlife. By late summer or early autumn, your plant has already rewarded you with months of bright golden blooms. Now it's preparing for the next stage of its life cycle. Those dark, cone-shaped centers you've been cutting away all season begin filling with seeds. Most people see faded flowers. Birds see dinner. Goldfinches, chickadees, nuthatches, and many other songbirds absolutely love black-eyed Susan seeds. As food becomes harder to find heading into winter, those seed heads become one of the most valuable natural food sources in your garden. If you've ever watched goldfinches balancing effortlessly on swaying flower stems while pulling seeds from the dark centers, you'll understand why experienced gardeners often leave entire patches standing until spring. It's one of the simplest ways to invite more wildlife into your garden without spending a single penny. But the birds aren't the only ones benefiting. The plant benefits too. As mature seed heads dry naturally, some of those seeds fall directly beneath the parent plant. Others are carried a short distance by wind, rain, or curious birds. By the following spring, tiny seedlings often begin appearing around established clumps. If you're growing Rudbeckia hirta, this natural reseeding is exactly how the plant keeps itself going year after year. It's almost like getting free flowers without lifting a finger. Of course, you don't have to keep every seedling. If too many appear, simply transplant a few to another part of the garden, or share them with neighbors and family. Either way, you're letting nature do much of the work for you. Many gardeners spend money buying more black-eyed Susans every year. Meanwhile, experienced gardeners simply allow the plants to replace themselves. Sometimes doing less produces far better results. Now, while we're talking about keeping plants healthy for years, there's another secret that prevents one of the most common diseases gardeners face. And it starts with something as simple as giving your flowers a little breathing room. Number 8. Give them room to breathe. It's easy to understand why people crowd plants together. A full flower bed looks beautiful, at least in the beginning. Small nursery plants leave plenty of empty space, and that empty soil can make the garden look unfinished. So many gardeners plant everything closer together than recommended. The first year usually looks fantastic. Then the second year arrives. The black-eyed Susans double in size. Nearby perennials also begin filling out. Before long, leaves are pressed tightly against one another, sunlight struggles to reach the lower growth, and fresh air barely moves through the planting. That's when problems begin. Fungal diseases love still, humid conditions. When leaves remain damp for hours because air can't circulate properly, diseases spread much more easily from one leaf to another. Even healthy plants become stressed. The lower foliage may begin turning yellow. Older leaves die off sooner. Flower production gradually declines. Fortunately, the solution is incredibly simple. When planting perennial varieties like Rudbeckia fulgida, leave approximately 18 to 24 inches between each plant. At first, it may look as though you've left too much empty space. Resist the temptation to fill every gap. Remember, you're planting for what the garden will look like in 2 or 3 years, not 2 or 3 weeks. As the plants mature, they'll naturally fill that space while still allowing sunlight and fresh air to move freely through the foliage. You'll notice another benefit as well. Each individual plant develops a more balanced shape. Instead of stretching and competing with neighboring plants for light, every clump has room to grow evenly in all directions. Maintenance becomes easier too. Water reaches the soil more effectively. Deadheading takes less time. Inspecting for pests or diseases becomes much simpler because you can actually see the base of the plant. Think of spacing as an investment. It may not look exciting on planting day, but 2 or 3 summers from now, you'll be thankful you gave your black-eyed Susans enough room to grow into the plants they were always meant to become. And speaking of plants growing larger, eventually, even perfectly spaced black-eyed Susans need a fresh start. Number 9. Divide crowded clumps before they decline. One of the biggest compliments you can give a perennial is allowing it to become too successful. That's exactly what happens with Rudbeckia fulgida. Year after year, it quietly spreads underground. The clump becomes wider, denser, more impressive. For a while, everything looks wonderful. Then something curious begins happening. The outer edges continue growing strongly, but the center of the plant starts looking tired. Fewer flowers appear. Some stems become weak. Eventually, you may notice an empty patch developing right in the middle of what was once a beautiful mound of flowers. Many gardeners assume the plant is simply getting old. In reality, it's asking for a little more space. As perennial clumps become increasingly crowded, the roots compete with each other for moisture, nutrients, and growing room. The oldest sections in the middle gradually lose their vigor, while newer growth keeps expanding around the outside. Fortunately, this isn't the end of the plant. It's simply time to divide it. Every 3 to 4 years, preferably in early spring, just as new green shoots begin emerging, dig up the entire clump. Don't worry. Black-eyed Susans are much tougher than they look. Shake away some of the soil so you can clearly see the root system. Using a sharp spade or garden knife, divide the clump into several healthy sections. Each piece should contain strong roots and healthy new shoots. Now you have options. Replant one vigorous section back into its original location. Move the remaining divisions to other parts of your garden. Create a new flower bed, fill empty spaces, or give them away to friends and neighbors. In just a few years, those smaller divisions will grow into beautiful flowering clumps of their own. It's one of the easiest and most economical ways to multiply your favorite perennials. More importantly, dividing keeps the original plant young. Instead of slowly declining from overcrowding, it receives a fresh start that encourages stronger growth and heavier blooming for years to come. Many gardeners think dividing is complicated. It isn't. You're simply giving one healthy plant a chance to become several healthy plants, and there are still 2 more secrets to go. One of them explains why those rough, hairy stems are actually one of black-eyed Susan's greatest natural advantages, and why you should never try to fix them. Number 10. Don't worry about the hairy stems. They're your plant's built-in defense. Have you ever run your hand across a black-eyed Susan stem and noticed how rough it feels? It's not a flaw. It's one of the reasons this plant has survived across North America for generations. Every stem and leaf is covered with tiny, stiff hairs. They aren't there by accident. They're part of the plant's natural defense system. Those rough hairs make the foliage far less appealing to many animals that love to snack on tender garden plants. While no plant is completely deer-proof or rabbit-proof, black-eyed Susans are among the last flowers many browsing animals choose. Imagine a deer walking through your garden. It has a choice between soft, juicy hosta leaves, fresh daylily shoots, or rough, scratchy black-eyed Susan foliage. Most of the time, the deer chooses the easier meal. The same goes for rabbits. Those tiny hairs create an unpleasant texture that many animals simply don't enjoy eating. That's one of the reasons you'll often see black-eyed Susans thriving in gardens where other flowers have been completely destroyed. Yet many gardeners don't realize this advantage. The moment they notice a deer in the neighborhood, they rush out and begin spraying chemical repellents across every flower bed. Sometimes they spend money on products they don't even need. Now, if deer pressure is extremely heavy, no plant is completely safe. A hungry animal will eventually eat almost anything. But under normal conditions, black-eyed Susans are remarkably resilient without constant spraying or expensive deterrents. Those rough stems provide another small benefit as well. The tiny hairs help reduce moisture loss by slowing the movement of air directly across the leaf surface. It's a small adaptation, but every little advantage helps a prairie plant survive long periods of summer heat. So don't worry if your black-eyed Susans don't feel soft. They're not supposed to. That rough texture is one of the reasons they've become one of the toughest perennials you can grow. And now we've reached the final secret. Ironically, it's something many gardeners do at exactly the wrong time every single year. Number 11. Wait until late winter before cutting them back. Autumn arrives. The flowers fade. The leaves begin turning brown. Many gardeners immediately grab the pruners. After all, cleaning the garden before winter feels productive. Everything looks neat. Everything looks tidy. But sometimes the tidiest garden isn't the healthiest one. When you leave black-eyed Susan stems standing through winter, something remarkable happens. Those hollow stems become tiny shelters. Native bees crawl inside for protection. Small beneficial insects spend the winter hidden safely within the dried stems. Spiders use them as protection from harsh weather. Even after the birds have finished eating many of the seeds, the remaining seed heads continue adding interest to an otherwise quiet winter garden. Frost collects around the dark cones. Snow settles across the stems. Instead of looking lifeless, the garden still has structure and character. Meanwhile, beneath the soil, the roots are simply waiting, patiently, quietly, preparing for spring. Then, as winter begins coming to an end and the first green shoots start pushing through the soil, that's your signal. Take a pair of clean pruners and cut the old stems back to just above ground level. By waiting until late winter or very early spring, you've given beneficial insects time to emerge naturally. You've protected wildlife throughout the coldest months, and you've removed last year's growth just before the fresh new season begins. Timing makes all the difference. Cut too early, and you remove valuable winter habitat. Wait until spring, and your garden works with nature instead of against it. It's one final example of something we've seen throughout this entire video. Sometimes the best way to grow healthier plants is simply knowing when to leave them alone. So before you head outside, let's quickly bring everything together. First, choose the right species for the kind of garden you want. If you're looking for dependable perennial clumps that return year after year, Rudbeckia fulgida is the better choice. If you prefer flowers that naturally reseed themselves, Rudbeckia hirta can keep your garden full for years. Next, plant them where they'll receive at least 6 hours of direct sunlight every day. The more sun they receive, the stronger the stems, the healthier the foliage, and the heavier the flowering. Don't spoil them with rich fertilizer. Black-eyed Susans perform their best in average soil, where they naturally focus on producing sturdy growth and abundant blooms instead of excessive leaves. Water the soil, not the foliage. Keep the leaves as dry as possible to reduce fungal diseases, and always aim the water at the root zone. When you do water, water deeply, then allow the soil to dry before watering again. Deep roots create tougher plants that handle drought far better than shallow-rooted ones. Deadhead throughout early and mid-summer to encourage continuous blooming, but stop later in the season so birds can enjoy the seeds and the plant can naturally reseed itself. Give every plant enough room to breathe. Good air circulation helps prevent disease and keeps your flower bed healthier for years. Divide overcrowded perennial clumps every 3 or 4 years. It's one of the easiest ways to rejuvenate older plants while creating free new ones for other parts of your garden. Don't worry about those rough, hairy stems. They're one of the plant's greatest natural defenses against browsing animals. And finally, leave the stems standing through winter before cutting them back in late winter or early spring. Your garden, and the wildlife living in it, will thank you. If you follow these 11 simple habits, you'll discover why black-eyed Susans have earned their reputation as one of the toughest, longest-lasting flowers you can grow. They're not demanding. They don't ask for constant attention. In fact, once they're established, they often perform best when you simply let them do what nature designed them to do. Plant them in the right place. Avoid overthinking every little detail. And year after year, those bright golden flowers will return to brighten your garden with far less effort than you ever imagined. If you're ready to stop wasting time on plants that die every winter and finally build a garden that takes care of itself, don't forget to grab your copy of The Plant Once Garden. It's 150 pages of everything this channel teaches, completely mapped out for you. Inside, you'll find perennial foundations, long-term planting strategies, complete garden plans, seasonal planting calendars, and the common mistakes that prevent gardens from reaching their full potential. Just scan the QR code on your screen right now, or click the link in the description below to get started. And if you enjoyed today's video, let me know down in the comments, which of these 11 secrets surprised you the most, and how long have your black-eyed Susans been growing in your garden? If you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss another video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.